Right, so I think here we are. Thanks, Yoav. Thanks for the great talk about Nimble. So now we're gonna switch gears a little bit. We're gonna go back to Velox. One of the things we wanna talk a little more about is just the open source governance, right? So we see a lot of external contributions. We see a lot of companies getting engaged on Velox. So this is part of the discussion on how we kind of formalize and how we take this, the community, and how we kind of really explain how governance and how decision making works on the project. Masha unfortunately couldn't join us this year, so we're going to be here. I'm guessing that she's online on the call at some point. So me and Sridhar are going to be giving the talk, but she's going to be here. If you guys have any topics, any questions, we can have a Q&A on the end.
All right. With that, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Great to see you all here. I'm Sridhar. I'm from Meta, and I support the Velox team. And we have Pedro and Masha. Again, Masha couldn't come in person, but we are going to talk about the technical governance, the mechanics, how we have been thinking about it, right? So with that, the agenda for today is we want to give a brief history about, how Velox came to life, right? How has been the journey so far over the past few years, and even taking a stock and looking at what we have accomplished together and celebrating those wins. So that's one of the reasons why we all got together, right? Along with all the exciting talks out there. So the second thing is we would want to share the principles of what we believe would lay a stronger foundation for us to operate as a community. And followed by the governance model itself, like Pedro will be talking more about like the mechanics, how do we think we need to operate, what are those roles look like, and finally the next steps, right? So in order to get there, we need to do some tactical stuff and also some strategic ones, right? So what is the foundation that we need to lay in order to get there? So with that, Pedro, yeah, history. And this is the slide I love, right? So Velox started in 2020. So with two engineers, and it's Ori and Pedro. Oh, sorry, Ori and Masha. Pedro joined very soon, but it was part of the Presto team at that point in time. But soon we realized that it's ahead of its time, and we need to kind of build strategic partnerships and also kind of push this project forward, right? So in less than a year, we decided to open source the project, and also already had some initial contributors as well, but we kept it in silent mode until the following year, which was 2022, where we made a public announcement along with having a paper, a presentation at VLDB as well. So it was just amazing to see how much traction we got like during the conference, post-conference as well. And in order to kind of bring the community together and see what's happening across board, right? We launched our first VeloxCon, which was in 2023. And most of you guys were there. It was a great event. And followed by that, right? So today we are here, right? So like, just on a fun note, right? We have about 225 registrations for VeloxCon 2024. And it was like about 150 last year, right? Look at how aggressively, actively we are growing. And this is all because of this community here. So, and also like one thing I forgot to mention, like we didn't get a chance to actually add the data points here, but I would like to share like quick glimpse of what's on my mind, right? So today we have around like 250 plus contributors. We have 3K stars on the project. I think it was about half a year ago. We have roughly about 25 strategic, like academic and industry partners as well. At least 3 universities, if I am right, are using Velox as part of their curriculum, academic curriculum. And I already gave the VeloxCon metrics as well, right? So along with that, there have been a lot of exciting talks about like how we are already leveraging Velox in production systems. This was not necessarily the case earlier, but talking about like batch systems, streaming systems, inference systems, and a lot of excitement around gluten that is happening in the open source world as well, right? So that's where we are with that. All right, like here's where we get to the governance talk, right? So just quick context on how did we even get here? So during last year, right? I shared all the numbers. That's where, right? Like there has been a lot of engagement, and people wanted to see, hey, how do we see the project evolving over a period of time? How do you want to like engage more contributors or like companies as well, right? So with that, we started brainstorming on, okay, what does governance mean, right? So we intentionally, after a few iterations, decided that, hey, let's split the technical governance from actually the business governance. The business governance focuses more on, hey, what's the foundation we're going to donate to and things like that, right? But the technical governance focus on the technical health of the project and, all the technology that we are collectively building, right? So it's a super challenging problem, right? Like, there's no right solution either way, right? So we have to make the best choice considering the constraints, the data we have right now, and we're gonna like continue to iterate on it, right? So with that, we did brainstorm with key stakeholders. Most of them are here over a few weeks, few months as well. Like, and we also explored different models, different projects, and came up with the one that we're going to talk next. But the goal is, right, like to define something and continue to iterate with the community and see what makes sense over the longer run. So with that, the next slide. So we explored few models, right? Like, PyTorch being one of it, but we went with Trino, Presto, and few other as well. And looking at PyTorch model, it made a lot of sense for us because it was even the life cycle of how PyTorch came into picture in the hindsight, right? We didn't plan for it, but in the hindsight, if you look at it, it was a niche market. It was ahead of its time. So it was open source since the beginning, built strategic partnerships, started to push on that front, right? And now it's a very successful project. So we thought like, that could lay a stronger foundation for us. And like we started going with this PyTorch model, and the goal is to optimize for project excellence, right, and longevity of the project as well. And it can only happen if we put together a stronger foundation and focus on the project health, the technical expertise that we need to build together. So that's what we are like optimizing for. And going forward, the principles, right? So I'd like to share like at a high level the principles. So as Pedro spoke in his keynote yesterday, right? So we are building the state-of-the-art unified execution engine. And in order to do that, right? So we have to lay a stronger foundation, and we are also thinking about powering the largest systems on the planet with Velox, right? So which means that like reliability is going to be key. It's foundational as well. And usability, as we will continue to integrate with bunch of systems, yeah, we need to make it like easy enough to integrate. So, and efficiency is a foundational thing, right? Like why Velox came to life as well. So with that, we are encouraging, passionate engineers who share the same vision as we do it, right? And who also hold the same cultural values as we do today. And with that, like we are focusing more on merit-based, which means like we are focusing more on the individuals, build both the depth and breadth on the technology itself, and how do we push it forward together, and not necessarily focusing more on the organizations to start with, though the individuals are backed by the organizations, and we are all like aware of that. While at the same time, right, the model is working, right? So we have been continuing to get engagements over a period of time as well, and we don't want to like turn it around, like, right, make a 180-degree shift and then disrupt the project. So we want to make sure that we make tweaks in such a way that it is functional, while at the same time it also takes into consideration some of the feedback that we already got. And those are the changes that we have made. And Pedro is going to talk in depth about what it looks like and the details around that. With that, over to you, Pedro.
Right. Thanks, Sridhar, for the introduction. Yeah, I think just adding to that, I think the idea is that we already have a governance mode on the project, right? So there's already a decision making, there's already a structure. It's just it's sort of implied, right? And then the feedback we got from the community is that people would like to understand how that works, like how they can participate. I think the idea here is that we want to formalize the model we have right now versus just adopting a model that worked for a different project, right? So that's kind of the idea. That's why we started looking at many different projects, how they're run, but that's also why we're not planning to just adopt the open source model that works for some other projects because whatever we have is working. So the idea is a little bit more just formalizing what we have today. So just getting more specific, I'm going to talk for a few minutes just about the governance mode and the different groups, the responsibilities, and the composition. So like Sridhar mentioned, the idea is that we talk to many people from different projects. PyTorch, or the PyTorch governance, is the one that resonated the most. It's also started as a Meta project that became open source, and then at some point it detached from Meta and was donated to the Linux Foundation, I think about a year ago. Also kind of the project values being really based on individuals. So I think a lot of the things are similar. We're not just adopting the exact same thing, but the model we're trying to define is heavily based on what PyTorch did. Essentially, the community is organized in kind of 4 different groups. First one is just contributors, right? So just people who show up, people who not just kind of write code and submit it, but people who are actually using the project, they're kind of compiling, they're reporting problems, they're running benchmarks, they're kind of working with the community, filing issues, helping review code. So there's a large community of people who are, they're also maybe not formally, part of the governance mode, but they're also participating on the project. So this is the kind of the larger part of the community. On top of that, we think that most of the governance and most of the work on the project will be done by what we're calling maintainers, our component maintainers. So this is just the idea of people who are highly engaged in the project, who have a lot of context, and who are actually putting the work and maintaining different components. Aside of that, we also have this idea of having a leadership group, which is just a set of people who whose responsibility is a little more in kind of project direction and project leadership. Things like we're discussing today, like in the future, if we want to onboard GPUs, use accelerators, change file formats, different integrations. So it's a little bit more kind of directional leadership of the project and strategy versus kind of more day-to-day development and kind of library maintenance. And then between this leadership council, we're going to have a chair who is the catch-all decision maker. And then the next few slides, we have a little more details on those, kind of the 3 less groups. So the first one, like I mentioned, is component maintainers. Just because of the library breadth, like there's so many things, so many components, so much complexity that it's really hard to have people who just have context on everything we have inside the library. So what we usually see in practice is that people specialize. We have people who have a lot of context and have been maintaining the expression evaluation engine, or people who work specifically on Parquet readers and writers, or people who work on S3 connectors and things like that. I think that's the idea, like because the library is so large and there's so much complexity, and some of those things are fairly encapsulated. We want to define different components of the library, and then people would be specialized and responsible for maintaining those different components. So the idea here is just the component maintainers will be really hands-on people. They're just people who are actually, working with the community. And I think the idea here is less about how many PRs and how many components and how much code you contributed, but kind of the opposite, how much ownership over the component you're presenting. Right? So are you the person who's actually, engaging with the community, helping reviewing PRs? When CI is broken, are you the person who's actually going and fixing CI, helping extend continuous testing systems? Like, so it's a lot more about ownership and the sort of the community service you put versus just a kind of a count of PRs and how much code you contribute. We also appreciate code contributions, but those are sort of different responsibilities. There's also the idea that component maintainers, because they're engaged in the project and because they understand the code base, they have the right of approving PRs. Right? So for you as a contributor, you can submit PRs as long as a component maintainer reviews and accepts, your PR will get merged. Also, this idea is that it's independent of affiliation. So it could be people from Matter, could be people from other communities, could be people, I don't know, that don't have any affiliation. It's just about showing up and doing the work. Like I mentioned, just kind of listing the responsibilities. This is about reviewing and approving pull requests, responding to bug reports, participating in design discussions, maintaining, improving code base health, fixing broken and flaky tests, improving documentation, enhancing and improving APIs. So this idea more about maintainership versus just contribution, versus just code contributions. So just a quick takeaway about this group. So this is where, this is the work, right? This is like how the library gets developed. Like here is where most of the development will go, most of the engineering time. So this is where I think the group where we really need to scale and we need to onboard more people. Like we discussed, the maintainers, they have the prerogative of actually approving PRs because they are the people who are actually going to jump in and fix it if something's broken. Like we discussed, we're splitting not physically, but logically, the library in different components. And those component maintainers, they have full rights of making local decisions, of making decisions on how the API, or how the component is developed and how the component is being enhanced. Just kind of a key takeaway here, we hear there's a lot from community, just to clarify, and the idea is that being a maintainer just sort of, it's a job, right? So you're signing up, so you're the person kind of showing up every day, helping, fixing things. It's not about implementing a few features and getting a status of being a maintainer, right? So it's actually a job you're signing up, and it's a lot of work, and and it's a volunteer base. And again, it's a little more about the community service you do and how much you help the project versus just how much code you put in it. Aside of that, there's a leadership group. So this is a small group of highly skilled hands-on engineers that have a lot of expertise in the data management space and have been engaged with the library and also really understand the community, the different integrations. The idea here is this is a group that is really focused on maintaining the quality, maintaining the library reliability, and kind of upholding the project principles and kind of design philosophy. Again, there's people who are active in the community, kind of always engaging and helping and engaging with discussions. And just have a deep understanding about not just Velox, but data management in general. And again, it's also independent of affiliation. So like I discussed, the responsibilities of this group is a little bit less about just improving and maintaining components, a little more about project direction and strategy. So those are the gatekeepers of project values. So we, about a week ago, we published a page on our website that describes the project mission, what are the things that we value, like what are the project principles. So those are the people who are really kind of looking and working in the community, and there's something that sort of goes against the values or against the mission. Those are the people who can intervene and kind of align things and making sure that the project overall is moving the direction it's intending to. Because of that, members of the Leadership Council, they have rights to dispute decisions made by component maintainers. Essentially, is this idea that if your component maintainers make a decision that somehow goes against the project mission or goes a different direction, then this group of people who have the project strategy and project leadership in mind, they can dispute this. And of course, it's not just about dispute and blocking things, it's explaining the rationale of why we think that based on where the project is going, like why this might not be the right direction. They also have the responsibility of nominating and approving maintenance. So just the takeaways, like I discussed, the idea is that this leadership group is a lot more about project direction and project leadership and kind of course correcting things that might not go the same direction that the project is intending to. And as part of this leadership council, there will be a chair. And this chair is a kind of a catch-all decision maker. Therefore, in the unlikely scenario where there is a discussion that for some reason the leadership group cannot get to a consensus, there's one person who can settle disputes. Just quickly describing where we are and what are some of the next steps on the governance discussion. Like I just mentioned, about a week ago, we published this article describing the project mission, some of the principles, this idea that if we're developing something, and just because how pervasive this is in the industry, reliability needs to be the first thing or the thing we care about the most. So there's a few, like we discussed some of the principles, also this idea of open source, that we want to be open, we want to use help from the community. So the first idea is just kind of settle the direction for the project, and this is where we're planning to go. And again, this is sort of orthogonal to companies and affiliations. Just as a project, as a community, this is where we want to go. And of course, in the project of defining those things, we have discussed with many of you. The idea is that now that we have kind of a direction, the project principles and values formalized, we want to formalize the mechanics, which is essentially this idea we just discussed, right? The project today has a governance model, decision-making already happens. It's just implicit. So we want to make this formalized and published so people actually understand how this is supposed to work. We're planning to publish this as a document of governance, technical governance mechanics in the next few weeks. And like Sridhar said, this is a very complex space. We're probably going to get a few things wrong at first. So I think the idea is just saying, okay, this is sort of what we have right now. This is initial stage. And then let's iterate and let's make it better as we go. More longer term, we have this idea that directionally we want to detach the project from Meta. However, there's still a few dependencies or things that are sort of intertwined with Velox tooling that we need to decouple first. We have a few slides here, but essentially how the repos are organized is that we have a GitHub repository, of course, that's public, and that's where we get contributions. But all this code base, like all the PRs we get externally, they get first merged into our internal repo, and then that's where the code gets merged. And this is done because of many historical reasons. The main reason being that the project actually started inside Meta in our internal repository. Right? So essentially, we have this workflow where we get external PRs, we merge them internally, and then they get synchronized externally to GitHub. And because we do that, most of the testing today happens on the Meta internal side. So we of course, we do have some tests on CIs, but most of the integration tests, most of kind of the heavy frameworks that run for a while and look for bugs, they all run internally, right? So that's why it's not as straightforward to just flipping the GitHub and making sure that we can merge PRs directly on GitHub, because then we would lose this testing, right? So before we can do that, we need to move all this testing and really beef up the GitHub open source CI, and just making sure that everything that we run internally, that all the integration tests with Presto, with other systems, that we actually run all of them on the left side. And this is actually a lot of work. So before we can become GitHub first, there's a lot of things that we need to improve in our open source tool infrastructure. There's just a list of things here, like enabling different types of sanitizer, improving linters, checking for circular dependencies, having better tooling for detecting and disabling flaky tests. There's a very long list of things that we need to do before we can become GitHub first. And then to further detach from Meta's infrastructure, like this is kind of the first step. Then we need to fix the tooling. I think the point here is there's just a very large list of things. Some of them need to be made by Meta employees because they depend on Meta infrastructure, but most of them are just things that can be done on GitHub. So if for any companies and individuals, somehow interested in accelerating this process, we have a very long list of issues. We're accepting contributions. We're actually, trying to get more help to speed up this timeline. Essentially, this sort of call for help. So if anyone wants to help accelerate this timeline, we got a lot of questions, and when we're going to become GitHub first, when the project will be attached. So this is sort of the main dependency, and it's a lot of investment. So people are interested in this, just show up in the community, let us know, and we can discuss how we can help. I think that's everything I had. I hope we have some space for questions, but thank you.